Hello, folks. It's about 6:30 now. So I would like to introduce our final presenters, saving the best for last.
Oh, I don't
um,
know about that today.
you know, just bring us home.
Just bring it on home.
Thank you so much for being here, Greg. We appreciate you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Um, so I like an interactive class and the participation. So if you have anything you want to say, go ahead and say it at any time. Um, so because that's what this is about. This is about sharing information, knowledge, and power. And I thought, I wish I could have been here all day. Unfortunately, I've been in a hospital and they finally just brought me my computer. It's like, oh my God, we're coming down to the wire. I haven't done my hair and makeup, but I'm here now. So, with that said, we sit where we are, wherever that might be, and we talk about being a victim. And I was having a conversation with the nurse that was here, listening to, him, the talk that was going on. And where do we lie and own our victimization and our oppressiveness? I just spoke at Ohio State, and a lot of the papers talked about the fact how I covered being an oppressed, and I've never saw myself being an oppressed individual. So as we look at things, and I told you this story, I'm going to repeat it, and then I'll go into something else. But so a farmer goes out and he finds a horse, and he comes back with the horse. And the farmers and the rest of the village say, oh, you found a horse, that's wonderful, that's great, that's good. He says, good or bad, who's to say? Well, the next day the horse runs away, so everybody in the village are like, oh, the horse is running away, that's bad. He goes, horse ran away, good or bad, who's to say? A week goes by, the horse comes back with a whole herd of horses, and they start nurturing the horses, and he gets his son on a horse to ride and teach him how to saddle a horse, and the son falls off a horse and breaks his leg. And the town people say, oh, that's terrible, your son broke his leg. He says, my son broke his leg, good or bad, who's to say? The next week, the army comes through and takes all the available men, leaving his son who has a broken leg. Who's to say what's good or bad? That is your choice. Those are your decisions that you make. When we talk about the history of HIV, and I'm going to tell you that June 15th, 1986, how many of you were alive? I doubt very many of you. I see one other person who might have been alive. You're probably young and sexy, but you're on the bottom on the right. I'm winking at you. Okay, I think I'm funny, so you can laugh. Um, so I was diagnosed with HIV. I was on my way to work when the short north, which you guys all go through now because you love the short north, was nothing but abandoned buildings, prostitutes, drug dealers. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, because I worked downtown, lived on campus, I would walk through there. I wasn't a victim because I did my own thing. I walked my own pace. I made sure that I didn't bother anybody. I lived my authentic life without having to throw it into somebody's face. Is it important to throw it in somebody's face sometimes? Absolutely. Is it important for you to stand up and say, this is what I want to do? This is how I want to move forward? Absolutely. And I will guarantee you, if you choose to do whatever it is you choose to do, I will be the one behind you with the bottle of water and the bailout money for you because I believe in you. Because you believe in yourself enough to be here right now. We didn't back then because we were trying to find our own space, our own world. So I was working at a restaurant, fine dining restaurant. I was also captain of the men's club team in Ohio State playing volleyball. I'm 5'6", okay? Not the brightest sport for somebody short like me to play. I could walk underneath the net, but I never saw myself as short or, and I had the Napoleon complex, so I always saw people my height. I brought them down to my level. You got to own your world, whatever it might be. So I was at work and I had just broken up with my partner. And it was one of those relationships that was going to be forever. 2.8 dogs, the station wagon, the white picket fence, the vacations, the whole 9 yards. But we were too young. It was too intense. And so we broke up. During the epidemic, he passed away of a heart condition. He was also HIV positive. He wasn't diagnosed at the same time I was. So I was playing sports and traveling. Um, there was an evolution in sports around the gay community, softball, volleyball. I played in the first gay World Series and, the whole 9 yards. And so I was walking to work and I stopped. A friend of mine gave me a t-shirt, a cute t-shirt, had this woman with the surfboard on it. And I'm like, oh, I like that. And I look good because it was a fun color too. And so I thought, I'm going to wear it to this party. So I wore it to this party. Didn't feel good at the party, so I went home and went to bed. That was my seroconversion point, where you feel the flu-like symptoms. I know that because a week later, I had to stop at the doctor's office on my way to work, June 15th, 9 o'clock in the morning, on my way to wait tables in a restaurant. And the doctor looks at me, he looks at my legs, he says, you have shingles, and at 25, you shouldn't have shingles. You probably have HIV. We'll give you the test. Never had to go back for the test results. What I did though was I ran. I didn't tell anybody for a lot of years, almost 86. So it wasn't until 90 that I finally told somebody else after that an initial day. Because I went to work and I said to my bartender, Mary Beth, I said, Mary Beth, I don't want to die. She said, Greg, you're not going to die. So I kicked Cleopatra off the boat. I kept the men fanning and feeding me grapes, and I sailed down the Denial River. Beautiful scenery, but also very lonely. You're lonely standing there on the softball fields as your friends are discussing AZT, whether AZT is a poison that is killing people, or is AZT is what's saving them. Is HIV and AIDS related, or is it just semantics? And where do we go from here? How do you know? What do you do when your partner is the one who's sick and you're taking care of them, knowing full well that you're going to be there next? How many blinders can you put on? Because we all put on blinders, don't we? So I told Mary Beth and I told my boss at work. She hugged me and we didn't talk about it again. I decided I need to move out of town because if I get sick, I don't want anybody to see me getting sick. So I decided to move to San Francisco. I had some friends out there. So I packed up, but in the process, I met a man. And we started seeing each other, and I thought he was going to come to San Francisco and then come back, and he was going to find a happy life, and life was going to be wonderful for him. But he decided to stay with me. Well, he got sick, and I got scared. He got better, and I was relieved because I was his first. And I hadn't told him yet. So one morning I woke up and my face felt kind of funny. So by the afternoon, I looked in the mirror. Right down the middle of my face on one side was completely paralyzed. It's called Bell's palsy. We go into San Francisco Memorial Hospital, and if you know the history of HIV, that was one of the first AIDS wards, was in San Francisco at this hospital. Dr. Teresa Long talks about it as well. And I'm sitting there, the doctor walks in, he looks at me, he looks at my partner, and he says, are you HIV positive? Now I'm telling the third person, and in doing that, I'm also telling the fourth. The person that I say I love you to at the end of each and every day that I love you, I'm now telling him that I've just put his life in compromise. That I potentially, the love that I have for him and the love I'm giving him, he could end up dead. So we move back to Columbus. His grandmother died, so we go move into the house, and we, have our house and a happy home, and things are going well. Um, except I'm getting sick. I get uh, night sweats, and these are sweat so bad that you have to, your whole body is just slime. At the end of the night, I would have to leave my shoes on because I would get neuropathy so bad that I couldn't take my shoes off at the end of the day. So I would leave my shoes on until I would get in bed and then make a tent with the pillows so that the sheets didn't touch my toes. We stopped sleeping together because I could no longer, in good conscience, be the one to infect somebody. Because at this point in my life, I haven't infected anybody that I know of. So we break up, but we stay good friends. And he came to my mom's house for Christmas. And of course, we had the ham and the whole 9 yards, the deviled eggs. All I could eat was a piece of ham, 2 tomatoes, and 4 deviled eggs. My sister makes the best deviled eggs. They notice. As much as you want to keep a secret, you cannot keep a secret. So I'm at work, and now I'm going to OSU, the Infectious Disease Clinic at the AIDS Clinical Trial Group at the Ohio State University, and I'm getting my medicine. The protocols. So they're not, my records aren't even associated with my name. I'm a number. It wasn't until later that they combined them down the road when the researchers had to have names on them. And because you could do an HIV test without having a name on it. It's an anonymous test. When I did testing for the city, 70% of the people never came back for their HIV results. 35% of those were HIV positive. But if you don't know, you're not responsible. And if you're not responsible, you can't be held liable. Do you see the vicious cycle here? So I decide to go to OSU, and I meet incredible doctor. She's still my doctor. I meet incredible nurses, and they become my friends. And then I start getting involved in the community. And I think that's when I really got sick for the first time. I had a viral load, which should be 0, was at 444,000 in a microliter of blood. My CD count, which should be 1,000, was 2. I was about 2 weeks away from dying in 1995. I'd been on AZT for almost 3 years by this time. I was anemic, borderline diabetic, and I went down from 185 pounds to 125 pounds in 1 month. People notice. It was a Saturday night at work. I got the bread knife. I was cutting the bread and slipped, cut my finger. I gave the board to the dish tank. I said, run it through the dish tank. I was cleaning my fingers, and one of my cohorts came over to help me. And I'm like, no, don't touch it. And she looks me in the face. She says, we already know. Those lies you're telling yourself that you think you got hidden, that you're okay with, people want to know. People are there to share with you. Don't deny yourself that support system. I did, but I didn't anymore. So I started talking about it. I sat with a friend who was HIV positive before I cut my finger. We sat for 2 hours. He was sick, he was dying, and He would come in, pick up some napkins, take them home, fold them, bring them back, because he needed some connection with the normal life that he had before as he was facing death. We sat in a bar together for 2 hours. I never told him I was HIV positive. When I broke up with my partner, a different one, he came knocking on my door and telling me that he was HIV positive. I didn't have the courtesy to tell him I was also. He died alone. You don't have to die alone, nor do you have to live alone. So why are you? We talked about being an activist and what's that take, and we were just talking about this. If you go to the clinics, the abortion clinics, it's old white men with beards who are out there with their signs saying no more abortions. But they're fighting for the rest of your life. Are you fighting for your own? Because you're giving your life into somebody else's hands. So I decided to take my life back. And I started to tell people. I had one friend say, I can't be around you. It's not that I don't love you, but I've buried too many people. I just can't bury one more. One of the women I worked with for 17 years, we worked together 5 days a week. I saw her later on after we both left the restaurant and we went our separate ways. I ran into her and she was so angry. And it wasn't that she was angry at me as an individual or the fact that I was still alive, but she was angry because she couldn't process the amount of deaths that we had to go through back then. Because every time you turned around, somebody else had died. Somebody else you just saw in a bar that you wanted to talk to, but you didn't. Somebody else who lied to you and said that they were on a diet and that they lost 50 pounds because of the diet. The next week they weren't there because it was the HIV/AIDS diet, and they passed away. So I became activist. Now I became one of those that sit at the table quietly. And I do that because it's important to be seen and not heard until you have a clear understanding of what your voice is. And I didn't know who or what I was about. All I knew is that I was HIV positive. I had just conquered death, okay, and I was getting better. It was 1995. I was on new drugs. The protease inhibitors came out. No longer on AZT. I could stomach food. At one point, the only thing I could eat was peanut butter and crackers because I was on AZT and it was making me sick. I got Bell's palsy again, this time across my chest. And it was painful. These are the things you go through. You move from column A to column B, HIV negative to HIV positive, to an AIDS diagnosis, to being in a hospital, to getting out of the hospital, to not getting out of the hospital, to have friends that you play ball with for 2 years who live with you in the same apartment, who never told you that they were HIV positive either, who sat with it alone. See, I let him use my car over Christmas. He was supposed to come and pick me up. He never showed up. When I got back to the house, I could smell a ham cooking in the oven. My car in the driveway, but he was nowhere to be found. But there was a note that said he was in a hospital. When I went to see him, I thought his foot had swollen up. And then I realized his foot hadn't swollen up, but his body had wasted away so bad, it looked like it's a brick on the end of a stick. Those are the things you don't see anymore. You don't see the purple lesions, the KS, the cancer, the sunken in cheeks. Oh, I gotta go this way because I'm wearing tie. This is the face of AIDS. The swollen bellies. Now, these are the outcomes of living with HIV. So I do research, anyone I can get a hold of. And in 1995, when the protease inhibitors came out, the drugs that were supposed to cure HIV, things were happening that we couldn't explain. Body images, abnormal fat deposits, changes. And I said to my doctor, I said, I'm getting fat. She said, Greg, you're not getting fat. I said, I am. A year later, she stood on the podium and she said, we need to listen to our patients because they know what's going on. They know their bodies. She got off the podium, walked to the back where I was sitting, whispered in my ear, and said, that was for you. I should have listened to you a year ago. Because I was right. I was getting fat. I had abnormal fat deposits that were forming. I could not bend over and tie my shoe without being out of breath and choking because the abnormal fat deposits forming around my internal organs. I say that especially right now because Tuesday I came to the emergency room because I didn't feel well. I had some kidney issues. We already know this. So just coming here, I needed to figure out another plan. So I needed to take a step. And I thought it was sepsis, which could kill me because I had it last year and a half ago. And it was the start of sepsis again. Do not lie to yourselves. Understand the journey you've been on, learn the lessons, and move forward. So I went in 1995, I went on the protease inhibitors. I bounce around, sorry. So if you have anything to say, you can interrupt me at any time, okay? Seriously. So in 1995, I went 18 years on protease inhibitors. That's 10 pills a day. 365 days, that's 3,650. That's 36,000 pills. How many do you think I missed? I missed a total of 4 pills in 18 years. And that's why I'm alive today. Because my goal in life is to outlive my mother by one day. That's it. And I even asked her, when's she going to die? Because I'm tired. She didn't have an answer. So, but I would tell you, I come from a family of 6. There are 4 girls, then me, and then my brother. We're all 1 year apart. So we never stopped getting out of the car before we had to get back into it. I was a black sheep. Who figured? So, my sister's a lesbian, so we have a connection, but, you know, we're not a close family. I was never going to tell my family. But they figured it out when I couldn't eat anything more than 1 piece of ham and 4 deviled eggs. When I couldn't move and I didn't have any energy. So I decided to tell my least favorite sister first. She's 1 year older than me because, you know, 1 year apart, that's where you fight the most. So I told her and she said she loved me and she cried. And then I told my favorite sister who lives in North Carolina. So we got in the car and we drove to North Carolina. Now my mom is just ecstatic because my sister and I are getting along. There's peace in the family, you know, and we're both opinionated, strong-willed. Imagine that, a gay man with a strong-willed individual. Who knew? And so things were going down there okay. We get there and we take the 3 kids to the beach. And she went back to being normal, being hateful, just nasty to me. And the kids had never seen anything like that because my sister was never like that. So I had to tell her, don't say a word to me until we get back. So when we're getting in the car to drive back from North Carolina, 10 hours in the car, for 10 hours, my sister told me that I got what I deserved. I'm an embarrassment to the family, always have been, always will be, and it'd be better if I just died. She consciously flicked napkins out the window so that if we got caught for littering, since I was driving, I would get the $50 fine. You don't choose your family. What you do choose is how much they affect you. So when I got back to my mom's house and to drop everything off, so Eric, my partner, could pick me up, I went and laid him down, and all I could hear was her voice. And I was completely empty, hollowed out. I had nothing left in me except a little seed. And I decided that I was going to nurture that seed, that I was going to grow that seed, and I was going to be in control of the rest of my life. And I would never, ever give anybody that much power in my world again. And I never have. Now, in the process, Eric and I, you know, we broke up and he got involved with another man. Can you believe that? And I said they should live together. They said, no, Dean doesn't want to live with him. And then they end up living together. I said, you guys ought to get married. And he said, no. So I would watch his cats, the cat when he went out of town. And he calls me when I'm on vacation and he says, get your speech ready. Dean asked me to marry him. I was the best man at my ex's wedding. That's amazing. That's opening yourself to the world, to forgive not only yourself, but them, and forgive you for how you treated them. Because I knew I sabotaged that relationship. And I did it on purpose. Because he deserved better. It's not putting me down. But he deserves a world that he's not worried about becoming HIV positive. The last time we had sex was the Christmas Eve and the condom broke. Ruined my whole Christmas, not because the condom broke, but because I thought I infected him. And it scared me, because that's the reality check. To know that you have somebody's life in your hands, and how are you going to play this one out? But I also did his HIV test with blood, and it came out back negative. So my sister, my favorite sister, my least favorite sister now know that I'm HIV positive. I tell my brother and my other sister, and they both thought, oh, we're the last to know. I'm like, no, you're not the last to know. Your sister and your mother don't know yet, so don't say anything. So I go home. Now, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but back in our days, when we went home, we never went home alone. We always had somebody there to back us up. And we never went home if it wasn't a holiday, because we didn't want to deal with the BS, because you didn't want to deal with it alone. So you just stayed away from going home. So you made a disconnect, because we were disconnected back then. You're not, and it's incredible to see. I'm not saying it's not completely better, but there's a lot of support to have. Know this: I support you in anything and everything you endeavor. I will be the one to lay down so that you don't have to walk across the mud puddle. If it means you release yourself to your own unfolding and open yourself up to your own world, whatever that might be. So I go home, and all I could say to my mom was, I'm sorry. She grabs me, she pulls me into the bedroom, she gets on her knees, and she starts praying. And I look at my watch. How long do these things last? And she gets up, she goes, you have to get right with the Lord. She goes, are you sick? I'm like, yes. And she says, you have to get right with the Lord. And I start laughing. And she's like, what are you laughing at? I'm like, out of all the things that I thought you would say, that is the very last thing I thought you would say. Because we never went to church. We were never a religious group, you know. And she goes, what you do? Now, she never told me what it meant or how to find myself. I've always been my own individual. I think that's what frustrates her the most is now is because I don't cater to the what should be a norm about being a victim. And I'm strong-willed. And I don't allow people to hurt me or anybody else around me. I'm not afraid to take a stand for somebody else. So I leave. It takes me another year to tell my last sister. The reason for that is because she was born with holes in her heart and a crooked spine. She spent a year in a body cast from chin to knee. And then she spent a year in a brace after that to keep her back in line. She had 15 major operations before she was 13 years old. She didn't ask for that. I just didn't ask for the condoms. And I had them in my hand. Because I was at the Kroger's on 7th Avenue, because I lived on 8th Avenue. And stood there with them and put them down both times. Because I wasn't going to own who I was about. And it cost. Cost a lot. So I stand in front of you, HIV positive, for 35 years. I'm 60 years old. Gasp, I know, I don't look it, thank you. But I am. January 27th, 60 years old. I surround myself with people that influence my world in a positive way. I also want to be that person that influences people in a positive way. We've come a long way. You know, and I spoke about this earlier, where I say I'm HIV positive, and you know, people are like, oh yeah, my cousin was, my brother was, or you know, I had an uncle who was. We can say that now because we have our historical perspective that we didn't have before. But when you're stuck in the middle of it, you have no place to run to. Cool. Anybody have anything to say so far? I know I jumped around. Sorry. Anybody? So I've done research um, where I have taken drugs at night and spent the first 3 hours on the toilet on a Monday morning. I also did interleukin 2. Interleukin 2 is shots that you give yourself subcutaneously. It was we were giving it at a high dose, but it had a lot of negative effects on people. So we decided to try it at a lighter dose for 8 weeks every day. The first time I took it, within 30 minutes, I threw up. So I've done a gamut. I'm a guinea pig. I have the scars to prove it. Well, I'd say about 3 years ago, I did a presentation on body image. And by this time, I was back to being comfortable in my skin, wearing shorts because my legs, because the loss of the muscles, because HIV eats away the big body muscles. And they weren't my legs. They were pretty once, but not anymore. Then I had them both replaced, the hips replaced. You know, these are things that happen to you. It's what you do with it that decides your character. So I get up each day and move through it. And I move through it for you. So, Elliot, what do you have to say? Jill, Jonathan, somebody. This is where it gets fun.
I think we're all just in awe of everything that you have to say. Giving us a kick in the butt to get at it.
Yeah. No, thanks. You know, and it's funny because I had a nurse come in here, an occupational therapist, because they put me on an antibiotic that just I can't tolerate. And she's standing there, and then she says, "Greg," and I'm like, "Okay, so you know my name." And as we're walking, she says, "You don't remember me, do you?" I'm like, "No." She says, "You were my teacher at Ohio State." I said, "Really?" She says, "Yeah, and I graduated from my underclass in 2014. So it was probably 2012 or 2013 that I took the class. You're probably one of the most influential classes I ever had." Now, that's not to say I'm the most influential, but what that means is that when you strike the chord of connectiveness, you can never go back. One of the things I did in my class was I would ask individuals, "What have you learned the hard way?" And I would ask everybody, would go right down the line, everybody would have to answer. 50 students later, we would get done. One year, we got to the first row, last person, and he says, "I was molested as a child." The next year, two guys came up to me and said, "We took this class because we're a friend. We knew him since freshman. He's now a junior. He never talked about it to your class." See, you have the potential to reach somebody, but we never live in our vulnerability. Live in the vulnerability. So what, you make a fool out of yourself? I do real estate. I got to hear 100 no's before I get one yes. I mean, if I had to hear 100 no's in the 80s before I got one yes, God knows I wouldn't have HIV. So, but yeah. So we feed off each other. It's not a negative, it's sharing. Yeah.
I guess my question for you is, what advice do you have for younger LGBT folks who want to start learning more about HIV and AIDS and learning about the history? Like, where is a good place for folks to start?
Um, Dr. Jesse Quicks and Doodley's class, great class. Yeah,
That's what I say too. So we're on the same.
seriously, they do a great job. And you know what? We don't talk about it anymore. In 1995, when the protease inhibitors came out, we failed you because we stopped talking about HIV and we started living because we were living with it instead of dying from it. And in doing that, we didn't have the urgency that we previously had the years before because we weren't fighting the deaths. We were finding a way to live. At OSU, the second Monday of every month, the AIDS clinical trial group gets together. Usually eat pizza, and we look at protocols. There's a lot of history at that table. Call somebody that you know who's HIV positive. Ask them. 30 years from now, you all are going to be talking about the coronavirus in a different light. And it'll be the same way that we talked about HIV 30 years ago, that we're talking about it now, with the calmness, because we're not immersed in it. We can sit back and we can sit with it, and we can see how it affects. And you know, 1 month, well, in a span of 2 months, I lost 6 people because of the coronavirus. That is what we went through with the HIV epidemic. You know, this is a time for you to sit with your friends, to have those hard conversations, to shed the tears. We do World AIDS Day and we read names. And in doing that, the first year I read names, I was with my partner. And my friend Greg had just died, passed away, and I did it because I wanted to memorialize his name. And so we're in line, and everybody in front of me, everybody behind me is crying. And we cried and we cried and we cried for 10 years. It wasn't until 3 years ago that I said, because I was on a World AIDS Day event, I'm like, let's change this because it's got to change to, honor those that have passed away and celebrate life. You will celebrate life again. You just got to sit with this and get through it. Yeah. So I've done a lot of research, and I tell people I'm HIV positive. I had a friend, and I started telling people that I was close to, when I decided to tell people, and you get to the point where you have the lump in your throat as you're telling them, and then it gets easier, and then you pick those people that are on your fringe, that they become kind of an experiment in telling it that you're HIV positive, because it's okay if they don't accept it. So I had a Jewish woman friend of mine, and we were walking through Park of Roses, and we're talking, and she's like, "Look at these flowers; they're beautiful." I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "Edie, I need to tell you I'm HIV positive." She looks at me, she goes, "It happens. Now look at these roses." That to me is the epitome of a friendship. It's not, oh, let me sit in your victim, in your lack of power, but you just shared your vulnerability with me, and that creates an understanding. And that's what this is about. That's what I'm about. Anybody else? Somebody?
Since this day is about the AIDS quilt, I was wondering if you wanted to talk about it a little bit.
So I had a friend, Rob. And have you guys heard the Baton Rouge softball game? About the, yeah. It's a softball game where the guys put on dresses, heels, and wigs and play softball. Started as a fundraiser. You know who Twisted Sister is from Motley Crue? That's what I look like in a dress. It is not pretty. So we were bringing a quilt to Columbus. And so I went to see Rob. I said, "Rob, we're bringing a quilt. Do you want us to bring your brother's panel?" And he said, "Greg, we never finished that panel." A year later, I ran into him. First thing out of his mouth was, "We finished that panel. We finished that. We did it." He's memorialized. He's loved. It's right here. Because that's what the quilt represents. The piece of history that you can hold in your hand, right here and now, forever. The entity of a person that never had the chance to fulfill their lives, to complete who and what they were about. I was telling a story, and it's related but not completely. I went to dinner with a friend of mine when I was working at a restaurant. Actually, one of my guests that I was always waiting on. And I asked him, "Are you gay?" Because I'm like, "Why are you taking me out to dinner?" Because I don't trust people. He says, "I've lived with a man for 26 years, and nobody's ever asked me that question." There's a book called The Oral History of HIV, of Homosexuality. It talks about the early days and what they went through and what people go through and what we went through. We went through the HIV/AIDS epidemic, about keeping our secret, keeping our head down. You know, I used to have my medicine. I was sneaking it underneath the table. Went to a healing weekend, which is where we would take people away who are HIV positive away for 2 days, so that they could be around other people who are processing death as well. The people at the clinical trials kept saying I should go to this. I finally did. I went with a friend of mine, and we slid up and passed the driveway. and I'm a bitter oak queen. And so I'm like, oh, there's gay men here. I don't want to deal with gay people. Okay. I'm trying to find, I want to just deal with my HIV. I need to compartmentalize, right? Well, it doesn't happen like that in life. As much as we want it all to be compartmentalized, nothing ever is that easy. And it just so happens that this little kid ended up being in my smaller group, because you're in a big group and then you have a smaller group. And then they're your support system through the 2 days. My friend says, watch the way you feel as you walk in, and then we'll talk about how you feel when you leave. So I'm like, okay. So I walk in, we do the big one. By Saturday afternoon, I passed her in the hallway. I'm like, I don't need to wait. I understand what this is about. It's about owning your journey and about releasing yourself and being present in the moment. That little gay boy gave me more of a lesson than I could ever teach him. Not because he was gay, but because of the gracefulness which he dealt with his HIV diagnoses that I was still fighting. We handle things differently. So I started becoming involved with the Ohio AIDS Coalition, and started doing a lot of events, and that's how I got my name recognition in the community. I would go to DC, do protocols, and be activist because I learned my voice. Sitting quietly with people like Kevin Sullivan, who was director of the Ohio AIDS Coalition, and Michael McDonald, who ran the ACTG as the community representative. They were both HIV positive. Kevin died because he only had 2 lungs. He got lung cancer, and then he got it again. Michael died because he got cancer. HIV is only a small part of who they were and what they did. But they created a world for everybody else to sit in, to find their space. And that's what I needed to learn to do at these weekends. And I've sat at weekends and I said, I'm coming here with a ship trunk, and I want to leave here with a Louis Vuitton carry-on bag, because I'm tired of carrying all this luggage around with me, you know? And I just said it spittingly like that. That's my sarcastic nature. And 5 people came up to me and said, that was the most powerful piece that anybody could say to anybody, because they could relate to it. You have the potential to reach people. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there to do it. I need to be quiet. I'm on a Zoom call. I'm on a call. So with that, I think it's important that we come to, sorry, my nurse came in, to understand and sit in a value that you have right here. And you may think it's small and minute, that you're sitting here and you're listening, but you have the potential to change somebody's world. We were on a volleyball court playing, and of course, the fraternity boys were making fun of a little gay boy in the middle court. And it's like, show me your purse, show me your purse. And I whipped around. I said, I'll show you my purse. They're like, what? Huh? I'm like, yeah, I'll show you my purse. 5 years later, he came up to me. He said, do you know how much that meant to me? That quilt means that much to somebody, because it represents a change in her life, of letting go, of finding a new beginning. And that's what it is. It's an amazing piece of artwork. And it was built out of frustration, anger, hurt, and being immersed and death and dying and not knowing how to process through and being on a boat in the middle of a hurricane as you're trying to row through it. That's what HIV was. The quilt calms that hurricane. It gives people an opportunity to sit and say, I remember that person. When we brought the quilt here at one time last year when you guys brought it, I walked into the room and I had to walk out because two of the quotes were people that I knew right off the top, high school friends. All my friends from my freshman year at college here at Ohio State are somewhere on that quilt. They have a piece of me because I give it to them. The quilt represents that, represents giving of yourself, of saying, this is the best I got. I sat with a friend, the hostess that I worked with, her father got sick and she was taking care of him 24/7, 7 days a week. 24. And I found out about it and I said, let me come over at least for an hour so you can get out. And she's like, oh, I don't know if he'll let you. Because he was getting, a little agitated as he got out there. I went over there. He let me sit with them. And I only sat with him a handful of times. And when he was getting sick, I said, can I have his pajamas? And she's like, yeah. I had my sister make a quilt. And then I had her make her a throw. She gave the quilt to the nurse who took care of him and kept the throw for herself. I still, out of the blue, call and say what a wonderful man he was. It's when you stop talking about someone who's passed away that they're forgotten and unloved. Because they're not. You all right?
I think it's really emotional for us. A lot of us here are college students, and it's hard to not think of, all the friends that we made our freshman year.
Yeah. It's sad because I'm like, oh, they're gone. And yeah. And sad.
Yeah. But it's important to know about.
It is. And it's, you need to know your history so you don't repeat it. We fought the battle. Stop fighting the same battle. You women have gone to DC, you did a million women march, and then we stopped. We got to get somebody in the office that sees who we are. I will fight till I have nothing left to fight because it means that you can still have something to walk over, and I'm here for you. That's what it's about. Are you crying again?
Listen, I'm always crying.
Yeah.
I think a question I have, is how can younger LGBT folks get connected with those that might be from an older generation in the LGBTQ community?
Go to Stonewall, ask for the Trailblazers Club, and connect with somebody. Here's reality. You came out once being gay. When you get older, you go back in the closet. Because those people in the nursing homes may not accept you. So you may have to go back into the closet and live a hidden life again. And that's sad. That's not the way, yeah. So it's about finding a connection and knowing that, yeah, there are those perverts and whatnot, and you're always going to have those snakes and gross people, but Not everybody is like that. And so find that person, that old lesbian that you can relate to, that gives you the stories of what it was like in the early days. You know, I go to church, which cracks me up to say this because I go to a Unitarian church, which really isn't church. I'm just telling you. You? And so they have a rainbow connection. And so we do a potluck the third Friday of every month. And then somebody tells the story of coming out. Well, it's my turn. And so, and I'm nervous, so I'm not paying attention. And I tell my story. And I'm talking about the fact that I grew up with lesbian sisters and then playing sports and what I did. And then I knew all the college ball players at Ohio State. And someone raised their hand and says, Greg, look around the room. There are 13 women and you. Things haven't changed much. Like, you're right, Learn how to laugh. Because it's all about laughing. Yeah. Yeah. There's a man a lion is chasing this young man, and so he jumps off a cliff. And as he jumps off the cliff, he grabs onto the mountain. And as he's hanging there with the mountain at the top, the lion roaring at the top, he looks down, and at the bottom of the cliff, there's a lion roaring, waiting for him to fall down. And then he looks over in the cliff, he sees the most perfect strawberry. So he braces himself with one hand, reaches out, and he grabs, and he tastes, and he eats the most perfect strawberry. Do you know what that represents? The moment. See, the line at the top represents your past. It's yelling loud enough, but it's still out of reach. The line at the bottom represents death. It's inevitable. Nobody gets out of here alive. The key in life is to be present enough not only to see your strawberry, but to have the strength and the ability to reach out, grab it, and taste it and enjoy life.
Have you ever considered like writing a book or something?
Actually, yes, I have, and it's being being edited right now.
Well, I will certainly be one of your first customers.
Oh,
I think you just have a lot to teach us, and I love your spirit, and it's really refreshing. I think this has been a hard year for all of us, and it's nice to hear the positivity.
so this is it. You're done, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how about I want to say one word, and then I want everybody else to say one word or one phrase, just so we end up. Okay. So everybody gets to finish on a sharing, because I'm about sharing and love. And if you want to share, $50 is fine. Thank you. Thank you for doing the time and effort that it took to put this together. And thank you for asking me to be a part of it. I'm humbled.
We're humbled.
Yes, we're humbled.
We all really appreciate your time and you telling us your story. I heard it a couple of years ago. I think I was there when the first time we put on the AIDS Quilt event, but it's no less, I don't know, poignant and impactful. And I really appreciate that you're taking your own time to do this.
Thank you, but yeah. This isn't about me. I don't want to thank you. I want you. Did you enjoy it, Jared? Did this get?
Yeah, I did a lot. Yeah. It was a little bit emotional at times. I'm glad I don't have my camera on, but yes, it was a beautiful talk, and I appreciate what our, older members of the LGBT community that had to live through the AIDS crisis, went through, and the knowledge that you can share with us. Because I know you didn't have that same support from older communities when, you guys were young. And I think it means a lot to younger queer people to like hear that support.
Yeah. Cool. Everybody else probably fell asleep.
I'm actually pretty sure half of them have texted me saying they're crying. Okay, but what was it you wanted us each to say one word of like?
Just how you feeling at the end of this, and what did you get? Did you get hope, empowerment, healing? Did you find, what was your epiphany? Not from my necessarily, but from the whole event.
For me, I can definitely say I feel renewed. I think sometimes, we get into the nitty gritty and it's like this is just so much work and there's just so much to still do, but it's nice to sometimes reflect and be like, I don't know, I'm really proud of my community.
We need to come together as a community.
Yeah.
That's what disappointed me about San Francisco, was that you go south to Market for the Hispanic, you got to go to Castro for the sweaters and the pretty boys. You go to somewhere else for the leather. There's not an eclectic group of people coming together, and that's really disappointing me, because we live in our subcultures and we can't share. We don't share, and that's what's sad.
Would you like to share your word?
Yeah, I think I do feel a lot of hope. I think this year has been very, I don't know, like the past few years have been very difficult for me. And so I don't know, I'm I'm glad to, I don't know, it's good to know that like you can like take negative experiences and like use them to connect with people and support them. And that like, I don't know, those negative experiences mean something.
They do, because that's where you learn. When you sit with your vulnerability and your uncomfortableness is where you learn the most. So yes, yes. But thank you. All right.
Would anyone else like to share? We don't have to include this into the recorded part, and it doesn't have to be on YouTube. We can keep it for ourselves, is what I'm saying. Raya says that she feels love, and she says, I feel a lot of love being surrounded by so many great people today. I have to say I feel the same.
I feel the same too.
You guys are amazing.
And Laura says that she's grateful.
Good. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Be in touch.
Well, I'm wishing you also a speedy recovery.
Oh, this would be a piece of cake. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. But it had to happen. Something had to come true. And so I made it happen. Take control of your life.
Yes, Raya says, let us know when your book is published. I think we all want that first edition.
Thanks. All right, I would do that. I do have somebody publishing, editing it right now.
We're going to have to get autographs too. Once we're all vaccinated, it's going to be an autograph party.
There you go. Yeah.